Yeah,
So yeah.
totally.
Anyway,
Thank you very
right.
much for doing that recording with me.
No, it's fine. I don't think it worked though, which is a bit disappointing. But I mean,
No, no, no,
hey,
no. It did. It did.
yeah, and it's I guess it's just like it's archived away. You can fire that off at some other point or whatever it
I'm.
is. So.
It's going to. It's go to everybody who signs up for their free workspace. It's going in an email embedded into a. It's going in with like three other things that they need to see straight away.
Right, okay. Fine. Subject those poor people to my bad
It's not
chat.
a. It's not an endorsement. It's just a. Here's something you need to think about.
Yeah. Fair play, fair play. Anyway, we're live, everybody. So welcome to Brainfood Live on Air. We're bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. And today we've got a really exciting conversation for you. Again, a change of format. Usually, we have a panel discussion. We have lots of people on screen. This time, no, we're going to go with another solo, following up from our last week's amazing episode. And today we're going to be talking about what women want, particularly in tech, because we've had persistent issues of trying to move the needle in terms of gender distribution in technology, particularly in engineering jobs. And if anybody studied the percentages, it's generally between 5 and 8% or so, and it's been that way for the last 10 years or so. So all of this woman in STEM, for women, all this stuff, all well and good, but has the needle moved forward? It seems not. So why is that? And can we do something about that? So we've got Fionnuala O'Conor to join us for that. She's done a bunch of research for her latest book, and she's going to share some data on that. Anyway, Adam, you seem like desperate to say something. So
Yeah. You said, right, we've got a solo guest coming on this week. I wonder if it's going to be like last week where our solo guest couldn't get on for quite some time. So we to talk about how to respond to negative feedback. So we brought on the person who gave the negative feedback in the first place. So if we can't get Fionnuala on to talk about what women want, should we be getting somebody? Is there somebody out there who's ready to talk about what women don't want, or what women can't get, or what men want, or something like the absolute opposite of what it's about?
Hands up in the crowd if you just do a walk on. There is, by the way, a new feature on Crowdcast which I'm a toggle away from allowing anybody to just walk on the screen. So that is actually possible. I might just flick that on as a basic thing, just as a bit of a laugh, see what happens. But Fionnuala is here and we'll bring her on shortly. But before we get into it, let's do some sound checks, make sure everyone can hear us okay. Folks, if you're watching this on Crowdcast, just let me know in the comments whether the audio and visual is fine. We should be blasting this out on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere where I can possibly do it. So if you're watching in any of those places, let me know whether the audio and visual is fine. I think we can see actually that we are good on LinkedIn, which is great stuff. Okay, folks, brilliant on that side. Good to see that everyone's listening. By the way, thank you so much for everyone who's also restreaming this show. I think that's including you, Adam Gordon. So if you're watching this on Adam Gordon's channel, big plus to you. But we've also got Rob Walker. We've also got Alexandra Givetvai. We've got I think Juliana Park is also live streaming. We've got a bunch of people that are just generally doing it for us. So get out there and let's spread the good news. Okay, let's give our sponsors a quick shout out, as we always do. Folks, this week's sponsor is Greenhouse. They have been the most dedicated sponsor for Brainfood in 2023. They are stepping up yet again to say we want to support this show. Without our sponsors, we cannot run Brainfood Live on air, so we have to thank them for that. Greenhouse have been releasing some really interesting content on their website recently, so do make sure you check it out. I think this is actually open and not actually behind any registration wall. So jump onto Greenhouse if you want to look at things like talent maturity, if you want to look at interviews, if you want to look at sort of different ways in which you could get operationally more efficient. They're turning it into a really powerful resource. And of course, if you ever care about upgrading your ATS to something that's enterprise grade, go ahead and check out greenhouse there. Okay, cool. Let's get on with it. Adam Gordon, good to see you again as usual. How have you been? How was your week? Actually, tell us a bit of your news. You might as well, give us an update on where we're at.
Yeah, okay. So launched our recruiter enablement workspace product, Poetry, on Wednesday, 1 week earlier than we had in fact, Tuesday, sorry, 1 week earlier than we planned. 80 companies have come on so far and signed up for their free recruiter enablement workspace. You don't need anybody else on it for it to provide some value. So free recruiter enablement workspace at poetryhr.com. But of course, it's better for me if you bring all your team on, because then we get paid as well. So it's
go for the free plan, folks. Just clone your email and
go for the free plan, and I can almost guarantee that you're going to take about 5 minutes to be able to visualize. Hang on, the world would be much better if I had all my colleagues in here, because the network effect is really clear.
Yep, fantastic. Just share the link in the chat stream, you may as well. All right. And whilst you get on all that, let's review the newsletter as well before we bring Fionnuala on. So I think we were at 365 last week, I believe. Did you read the newsletter, Adam? And if so, what was it, man?
I did. Let's talk about HP's work relationship index first of all. So what they've said is that the world's relationship with work is unhealthy. It impacts your emotional, mental, and physical well-being. It is something which is bad for employers if you've got a bad relationship with work. And it's a big document. There's like 40 plus pages in there of information. So I think it's semi-academic, but it's also pretty easy to read. The difference between one country to another country is astounding. So 5% of people in Japan have got a healthy relationship with work, whereas 50% of people in India say they've got a healthy relationship with work. Now, I'm calling bullshit on that. I don't think there's any way that 50% of people in India have got a healthy relationship with work. But it's still, regardless of what number it actually is, it's still a lot more than Japan.
Do you know what? There's regional variance, but it also tells us a little bit how we need to be very skeptical of anything that's like self-reported. Because we end up just making commentary. Like, firstly, different people, different cultures, different whatever are going to have different comfort levels of saying or answering those questions. And it doesn't, I don't think, accurately measures too much things. Having said that, we do also have to take them at face value. You know, if we've asked them what they feel and they've said they feel this, then okay, at least we know they have said they feel this. So yeah, there's huge regional variance, and one of the valuable things about the survey is that it is touching in different countries and rather than just hyper focusing on one thing. So worth having a look-see in all of those things. Sorry, I interrupted there.
I was just going to say, like, the Western European and North American countries, there was a variance of between 20, like for Spain, up to, I think France was maybe 21, Germany's about 21, UK was 25, Canada was about 25, USA's 28. So there seems to be a bit of consistency in there from Western Europe and North America between 20 and 28%. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly bad for people and for industry that so few people have got a good relationship, a healthy relationship with work.
And that could mean like overcommitment as well. So it's not necessarily toxic, but it may be that your relationship is unhealthy because you're putting so much in, and actually that's depleting your, it's depleting your resources and stuff. Yeah, quite right, Ed. I want to try and set that up. Although the poll I think is already up there. I mean, I think it's a slightly different poll. But yeah. Oh, folks, whilst Ed's talking about polls, why don't you have a look at the poll on the right-hand side of your screen if you watch it on Crowdcast and cast your vote in there. So basically the poll question is, do you factor in gender when putting together workplace cultural practices? Or is it just, are you gender blind, basically? Or do you think, you know what, maybe we need to think about how women and men might want different things, and we need to design for that? So let me know, no judgment either way, what you think on the poll there, and we'll see where we go.
I want to
All
know
right.
what I want to know what all the people voting yes are saying. Is that yeah, absolutely, we do a lot of like football matches and golf days and stuff like that, because that's the main way that I've ever seen that work is a lot of men-centered activities.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the drinks, pre-COVID, the drinks after work is very blokey for sure. It's also very, for certain type of bloke as well. So it's certainly exclusionary to a large group of people, particularly women, I would say. But anyway, okay. Right. Worth reading that HP survey. Give us a couple more, mate.
Yeah. So the next one, you said something using the phrase overworked or something like that. That brings me on to the next one. So a guy on Twitter talking about how he does his exec meetings on Sunday night and has done for 20 years. Apparently Tim Cook does this as well. I quote, "First, it saves you half a day. If you wait until Monday morning, say from 9 till 12, you've used 5% of the whole week on your exec meeting. By doing it Sunday night, everyone can start Monday morning fresh with a clear idea of where to focus." My response to that is, if that's the way you're thinking, why don't you make your team, let's say you've got a coal mine, why don't you make them go down the coal mine on the Sunday night as well, so that they're not wasting Monday morning? And like, let's just get them working 7 days a week. Why are they sleep? Why are they playing football? Get them down the coal mine.
All right. So I see you're broadly critical of the case. Which, by the way, I think is fair. I think it's majority view probably is critical of this, but I do want you to read the thread because he's not saying everybody do it. He's saying executives do that. And I thought he put together quite a compelling argument, because I think Mondays are always a shit show in terms of productivity. Because you come in, you open your inbox, it's complete mess, it's horrible, and it's like, you know what, nothing ever happens. It's the least productive day ever. We're talking execs only, so we're saying, hey, listen, if you've got a senior level team, do you want to get together, get your heads around that, get it all blasted out, and then just charge into Monday with full fire? What do you think? Anyway, I'm basically pro Sunday working, I'm trying to say.
I mean, you're different. You're your own boss. You're your own CEO, and like you're not bringing a team of people who have got their own lives together for your Sunday night like exec team meeting. But I have done it a couple of times in the last 2 years. There's been 3 or 4 times when I have been called into Sunday night exec meetings, which was not every Sunday, but it was occasionally, and there's something important that you need to do if it's happening on a Sunday, and I have valued that. I have thought it's useful, but not every Sunday night. That's just encroaching into somebody's personal space, no matter how much of an exec they are. The difference is if you're getting paid millions every year, or you've got millions worth of stock options or whatever it is, then your life probably does depend on it. And it is probably number one of your priorities.
Yeah, I think maybe here's the difference between, are you a stakeholder, let's say if you're a stakeholder in the business, like you're an equity owner of a significant level, then I think that's justified for the productivity reasons. And I would think the regular thing is useful simply because if it's episodic, it's even worse. It's like, oh, you have to drop whatever you're doing. But if you set aside the time, I think it may work for you. Yeah, quite right, Chloe. I think it is very male dominated as well. And I got the feeling just reading on that tweet, it felt a little bit like it was just a tech bro type of scenario. But I'm still pro it. I still think to eliminate the crap of Monday, you might need to do that compromise. But anyway, let's agree to it. Well, I've disagreed with everyone here, so yeah, you're right, Adam. Everyone agrees with you. That's fine. But I'm kind of sticking with this. I think it can actually be useful.
Well, I'm not sure why there's a gender element to that though. At the risk of sticking my foot in it, which I probably will. Why men have got families as well, but
all right, that's true. But women are definitely primary caregiver. That's also a fact. That is again another very persistent sort
It's
of
entirely shared in my family,
yeah.
so I don't recognize that, but I appreciate that is correct. Sorry.
No. It's always when I'm bringing my personal sort of view into everything. And in fact, by the way, when anybody says anything, it's always autobiographical anyway. I mean, that's another thing you need to bear in mind. So all good. All right, give us one more. We're getting complaints from people on LinkedIn saying, "Where is Fionnuala?" Fionnuala's on the wing. She's coming in, but we're gonna talk about one more thing on the newsletter.
Okay. Let's talk about the source code agency's like sourcing metrics Bible document. That was great.
Okay.
The source code agency is a consulting business helping companies source, and two of their people, Balash Parotse and Alexandra Gietvoy, whose surname you added extra syllables into earlier when you.
I'm
said
sorry,
her name.
Alex. Yeah.
Let me tell you some of the metrics that you need to be thinking about. The number of active sourcing recs per person. They reckon between 5 and 10 is a good number per week. The number of QIAs, this is a good way of thinking about it, qualified, interested, and available candidates that they're submitting, they reckon between 6 and 12 a week. The number of QIAs per rec, ideally 2 to 3. Time to submit 3 QIAs per rec, 5 to 10 days. And then time to resubmit an entire different list of QIAs once the first list has been rejected, between 3 and 5 days. So there's loads and loads of great stuff in that document. And so I reckon you should definitely go and have a look at that if you've got any interest in sourcing, and everybody here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's free to download. I've just shared the link in the chat stream there. Really, really good piece of work from those two. And yeah, very valuable because these are sourcing specific metrics. So we hear a lot about recruitment or TA metrics. That's all well and good, but dive down to the sourcing aspect. Do we have a set of metrics that can actually measure productivity and performance there? So I thought that was a really valuable document, very popular as well. So please take a look at it if you fancy that. Okay, cool. Let's get on with this topic here then, Adam. Moving on to this discussion. What do women want? Now, as a manager and a leader of a business, you've actually put together companies, so you've had to think about this. Have you been conscious in designing your business practices, operating practices around women in a specific sense, or have you just thought, you know what, actually, it's not, it's pretty gender blind. We're going to make it inclusive for as many people as possible, but you haven't necessarily thought about women as a separate group to consider when you're putting together these practices. Can you share some of your experiences as a business owner and leader?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my candidate ID, and before that, social media search, the biggest those companies ever were, social media search was about 30 people. So I've never run companies with hundreds of people. And the answer is no. I haven't ever put anything in that is specific for, thinking about women. However, I have not in either of these companies run a business where we've had like long hours culture, or where there has been if there's an emergency, you're looked down upon because you've got to get to a school to pick up your kid, or anything like that. And so I think that I've always, I think would I be more conscious of specifically setting up an environment which is friendly to women? Maybe, but like I firmly believe people should get their, if people can get their jobs done, they should get them done wherever and whenever, and that doesn't matter at all. So there's yeah, I mean, that's my summary on that. I'm not a big expert in this subject, and I'm looking forward to learning from Fionnuala.
Yeah, and I'm not, by the way, obviously I'm not an expert either. But I am skeptical of the poll results here, because everyone's saying, yeah, we do that. No, you don't. I think that's actually quite unusual, because we're talking about being like very intentional in your thinking, And I'm just doubting that 79%. That's a very high number. Or it could simply be we have a very progressive and open-minded, future thinking group here in Crowdcast. So that's a possibility.
I mean, it will be. There is a filter bubble around you here. Absolutely. The people who follow you are the people who certainly are the ones who want to understand how to do everything better. And that is not most people.
That may be the case. All right, Fionnuala, I'm bringing you onto the screen. There should be a pop-up, which just accept that, and we should see you in a sec. So let's see what the research tells us on this. And by the way, this is specific to tech as well. So I'm sure a lot of the issues might be a kind of broader across sort of organizations. But what is it in particular about technology roles that create this situation? Fionnuala, wonderful to see you. Welcome to the show. For the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm Fionnuala O'Conor, and I'm a woman in tech. And like most women in tech, that means I've done a lot of different things in tech. Right now, I'm a consultant to companies about using tech in ways that don't completely piss off your workforce or wreck your business model. I've also been a tech entrepreneur, using all sorts of clever deep learning and other stuff that if I was talking to an investor, I would call AI. But if I'm talking to real people like you, I'll just say, look, it's statistics and maths and an awful, awful, awful lot of iteration. And I've also worked for a big consulting company running their tech products. And like everybody, I'm addicted to tech myself, and I hate it. And that mishmash of experiences and, if you like, expertise is something that means I've got really interested in not just how tech works, but how tech is built and who's building the tech. And actually why, as Hung, you said at the beginning, we've, for the last at least 20 years, if anything, inclusion and diversity in tech in terms of gender has gone down, not up. And that's something that isn't happening in all kinds of other areas. Something is going wrong. And so quite recently, I did some research with another amazing woman in tech to find out, well, what is happening here? And actually, how can we fix it? And what we did is, I've done in every bit of research I've done, I've been doing research for, about a quarter of a century now, is actually ask the people who are impacted. So we talked to over 400 women in 59 countries. I was thinking it was 60, but that was my mistake. I'd miscounted. Around the world, we've had them tell us, well, what's your experiences in tech? And also there are two other bits of research that I'm going to draw on much more because that recent research is going to be coming out in the book. But the research that I can share pretty fully is first of all research I did when I was at Hay Group, big HR consultancy where I was head of the tech product. So I actually got access to all their data on people that stretch back to the 1930s, if you can believe. And that a lot of that was about how people are using technology and also really understanding what is it that we can measure using tech and we can influence using tech with people. And then also I had a business called Matchpoint in the US, which was the tech startup I mentioned. And there we had a joint venture with a big psychometrics provider. We had access to all their data going back to 1947. That was, I think, 12 million individual records. And ourselves, we built up 8 million records. A lot of those were from people in the tech industry. So I've seen quite a lot about who's in tech, what works for them. And I'd love to talk to you more about particularly what works for women and then also what women want and what you can just forget about and you needn't do anymore because it's not helping and it's a bit of a pain anyway. So,
thank you so much. To dive into sort of what works, but let's put great on the context, and I think we need to spend just a bit more time on that because it would be really useful to see exactly what sort of data that you've been able to get access to. By the way, I've just shared Fionnuala's LinkedIn on the chat stream there, so feel free to connect. Okay, so a lot of this data, when you say that all that historical stuff, Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of what you mean by this? Are we talking about like numbers of hours that people are spending in office, or what am I looking at beyond? Okay, this person was working in this space.
Yeah, there's all sorts of data. I mean, basically, you've got, when you think about people and work, there are 3 types of data that is useful. There's maybe another one, which is gossip, which is super interesting, but I'm not going to talk about that. And the 3 bits that are useful are absolutely, first of all, what people do, what jobs they do, how many hours they work, where they do those jobs, how long they stay in those jobs for. That's the sort of what they do stuff. Then there is what they say, and that's very much what they tell you they want, what they will give as their opinion of whether they're happy in the job or not, which bits they like or not, what they say. Now, what people do is pretty simple data. What people say is a little bit complicated, because you have to ask the questions in a really smart way. Because, for example, if you ask me, what do I want to do in 10 years' time? I can give you an answer, but if you then check back 10 years later and find out what decisions I made over the last 10 years, quite often there'll be nothing to do with what I expect in 10 years' time. Humans are really, really bad predicting the future. We're also not great at recognizing what's worked for us in the past. As a consultant, the one question I ask more than anything else to my clients is, how did that work out for you last time? So I think you have to be a little bit careful about asking people what they say. Now, there are some ways in which you can ask, people what they say, and you'll get an answer that's true now and will inform the future, will be predictive. As recruiters, a lot of those questions. I'm very happy to share some of the things I've picked up over the years. So there's what you do, what you say. And then the third part of data, which is really what I've specialised in, is what's going on inside. Actually, what are you good at? What do you really care about? What are the things that you are curious about? What's your potential? And actually, what do you do well? And that's all internal data. People don't always show it in their actions. Their CVs don't always show it. If you ask people won't always be honest about it. But I think if you look at those sort of 3 sorts of data, what people do, what they say they want, and then actually what they're thinking inside, and the way we can find out that thinking inside, sometimes we can ask them, we can look at the choices they make, we can look at their interactions with others. If you put all those together, then you've probably got maybe 25% about the truth about how people work. What's the other 75%? Well, we've got a huge research future ahead of us, but 25% is better than we've got so far. So,
do you know what, Fionnuala? I really love the humility there, because I think oftentimes a lot of people who do a lot of data work generally come out with extreme certainties on what it is, and in fact, it's all very we're doing our best to predict or guess, and there's huge gaps in the information that we have. But I love the fact that we're caveating this in the right way. But that doesn't mean it's useless. If it's not perfect, it doesn't mean it's useless. We can get a general idea. And also the combination of what people say, and then what's the term? It's the revealed preferences, isn't it? So in other words, they say one thing, which is stated preferences, and then actually what they do, that also tells us a great deal. So very interesting. Go ahead.
It does, and I would say something else about that. That uncertainty. This is all probabilities, and I think as recruiters, there's no perfect prediction out there of who's going to be the best candidate, of how person X or person Y is going to perform. We're not nowhere. And I think one of the things that really has leapt out when I was, thinking about talking to you today and thinking about all the research I've done, is there is no one truth. There's no generality. There's no average. But equally, there aren't a million different possibilities. I mean, when I was looking at those huge data sets of millions and millions of records, and these, if I think about the Matchpoint records, these were records which were very much about the internal stuff I was talking about. So They're records of how people saw themselves, of actually the records of intelligence, competence. And when we looked at all these records, we compared them to jobs. So if you look at, say, all the data scientists in our database, and then you looked at, well, how good are they at being data scientists? How well do they do? We didn't find that there was one single profile that won. But equally, there wasn't infinite variation. Between 80 and 90% of the time, we found that there were an average of 4 different, slightly different profiles that predicted success. So I think one of the sort of things that I try and keep in mind is just because I see person A doing well, that doesn't mean I should go and hire another person A. It might be that exactly the right person ID is a person B, but it's probably not a person Z. So it's that sort of fuzzy logic, I guess, of there's no one answer, but equally we're not clueless. You know,
Yeah,
and the
I
more
love
you
that.
can think about these things and talk about them, and actually sometimes just ask direct questions, the easier it is to get the answer that works.
I love that. Okay, let's get into the topic on what women want in tech. Like, if I just asked you this question, you can give me 60-second answer. What's that going to be if you feel that?
If I had a if I had a 3-word answer, it would be men to listen. If I have a 1-sentence answer, it's women want to be treated genuinely equally and recognised for what they do. If I have a bit more of a kind of a paragraph answer, I'd say that, you know, right now we've got a situation where half the women who come into tech have left by the time they're 35. That says something about what it's like to work in tech. At the same time, when there's recent research that we've been doing with women in tech, when we're asking women who still are in tech, some of them under 35, a third of our group is under 35, 2/3 weren't. How happy are you with your career? How fulfilled do you feel right now? 2/3 answered positive, above average. Yeah, actually, I love working in tech. So I think there are quite a few. There is a problem, but at the same time, this is not an incompatibility of women and tech. This is something about the tech industry is not doing some of the really basic things that it could do that will make it a much more welcoming environment for women, and also will get more out of women's efforts. I think it was Tech UK that said there's about 3.6 billion to be released by actually getting more women into technology. That's the opportunity size. Now, I think that was a UK only figure. That's going to be huge if you take it globally, and frankly, I think 3 billion is an underestimate.
Yeah.
Fionnuala, can I ask, how does that compare with other industries? Because some of what you've just said, I feel like if you'd replace tech with manufacturing or construction or quite a lot of other industries, financial services, it might be there's a similar number of women of 35 and above who are no longer in that industry as well. Have you done any comparison across? Yeah. So is it worse in tech?
Yes. Tech's not the only bad place, but yes, it is worse in tech. And I think there's something about, there's a one called Claudia Goldin who just won the Nobel Prize for Economics. And she has done a lot of research on women in the workforce across sectors. And also I think she's gone right back a couple of centuries. So she's got huge data sets. And actually one of her big findings is that what she calls greedy work is especially bad for women. And by greedy work, she means the kind of jobs where you're expected to be on call. I mean, I was kind of laughing at your Sunday discussions. Yep. You're expected to be basically on call all the time, and it's unpredictable. So that can be everything from a gig worker who, you know, suddenly gets the text, you're on at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. You know, if you're a woman, and you're absolutely right, women bear the brunt not just of childcare, but of domestic responsibilities. I mean, we were struck by how many women we talked about the burden that was disproportionately on them of caring for elderly relatives. of doing just household admin. So there is something about, are men actually going to recognise that we're all the human race and maybe they should do their fair part? There's a societal problem, clearly. But back to your kind of question about sectors, the greedy work. Tech defines itself as a greedy workplace. You've got to be on all the time. You've got to be 100% dedicated. We are, we're going to work in ways that demand the maximum. Now, when you look at other sectors, they used to be like that and they're not anymore. So I don't buy it that there's something. I mean, I've built tech, I've paid people to build tech, I've worked beside people who build tech. There's nothing I've ever seen that inherently means, that person A is irreplaceable, that there couldn't be more of a team-based approach where, yeah, actually, maybe I can't be there on a Monday morning because I need to take my daughter to school or walk my dog. But maybe there's somebody else who can't be there on a Friday afternoon when that's perfectly fine for me and we can work it out. So I think there is something about tech thinks it's special. I'm not sure it is.
I wonder about, like, you talk about greedy work. Is that what
greedy work.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I recognize that in the context of tech. I recognize that in the context of banking as well, and financial services in general. Yes. So I wonder if if banking and financial services has evolved better than tech. Is that because it's a more mature sort of industry, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of that. And I think I would caution, because I think if you look at financial services, you have areas like asset management, where you have an awful lot of women, you have working practices that are very, very different from, say, crypto, to take another extreme. Now, why is that? What's inherently going on? And actually, a couple of things I think that are quite interesting. One is longevity. You're right. New industries don't tend to be the most inclusive for all kinds of good and bad reasons. Another thing that is in asset management, being good is really easy to assess. The numbers are very, very obvious. Whereas a lot of other financial services roles, it's not so easy to tell actually immediately and without any bias who are the high performers and who are the not. In areas where performance is very, very easy to assess consistently and accurately, women tend to do better. And there tends to be a recognition that actually somebody who has 5 children can still be the head of an asset management firm, for example, as just to take one example. So it's a bit of, I think there's been a lot of, I mean, in tech particularly, I hear the excuse time and time again, well, either there is a technical solution to this, we just need to fix the algorithm. Or I hear the answer, you know what, women, you got to step up. It's that you're not fitting in, a bit like the culture fit discussion. You're not fitting in with this culture. You're the ones who've got to change. And more than either of those two, I hear just what can we do about all these complex systemic structural problems? And actually, that's why my co-author Patricia Gustoso and I are writing this book, because absolutely we can fix these. These challenges have been fixed in other industries. They have been fixed in other contexts. Tech is not unique. And actually, tech can learn a lot from what's worked elsewhere in providing workplaces that attract more women, that retain more women, that actually get the most from the women they've got. I mean, one of the most shocking things from our research is how much value women have tried to contribute and has not been taken on. And as a business owner, that terrifies me. And I think other business owners should be equally terrified and should do something about it.
Can I, before we start talking about like maybe some of your summaries of what the solutions might be and what you've learned from looking at other industries that have achieved better, is what you're talking about, have you done any research around like differences across the functional areas. So there's often big differences in the makeup of a go-to-market team versus an internal services team versus a tech team. They don't really look the same. They don't wear the same clothes. So what is there any differences you've noticed? Are some of these better for women than others at this point, or not?
It's really interesting because we did look at those differences, and we also looked at cultural difference. I mean, and I'm talking culture in the big sense, like a national sense. Is it different being a data scientist in Saudi Arabia compared to Seattle compared to Stockport? So, and also, is it different at different levels of hierarchy? Are actually the problems when you start out in tech as a woman, are they maybe once you're hitting a glass ceiling? What's going on here in particular? And the thing I would say is overall, the message is the differences are far fewer than we had anticipated, actually. And by differences, I mean not in terms of the differences in roles, because you would not hire the same person to be a data scientist as to be a customer support person, as to be a hardware engineer. I mean, these are really different people who do really different things. But we were really surprised by actually how cohesive the culture in good and bad ways of tech is around the world, different levels, different roles, whether you're in HR in a tech company, whether you're actually building tech, whether you're selling tech. A lot of the same things really came up. And I think the biggest and the most shocking one was that tech is a very, very unfriendly place for women, far more than most other industries. I think parts of finance do come close, unfortunately. It was, we hear a lot of the discussion around what works for women at work talks about childcare accommodations and parental leave, things like that. Those are great. Those are table stakes. That was nowhere near the top issue that women in tech said was a problem to their career success. And I wonder whether people in the audience or even the two of you on the panel can guess what the top issue was.
Let's do that straight away, folks. Let me know in the comments. Let Fionnuala know in the comments. What do you think are the top issues for women in tech, or the ones that they've stated?
Number one. What was the number? It was overwhelmingly.
Exactly. You got to say one
pay,
thing. So,
is it?
Well, hang on. Adam said right. Pay. I want to see what other people say in comments. So bang them in there, everybody. And by the way, sorry I had to disappear reasonably midway there. Thank you for carrying on, you two. Just some internet issues as usual. Okay, so got some really interesting things: lack of sponsorship, pay parity, imposter syndrome. What is it? Misogyny, direct a hostility from men, I assume. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what Patricia is meaning there. Okay, that's simply because I got to read it. Macho culture. Okay, we're getting a lot of those things. I'm going to go for comp. I think it's comp. If it forced me into one thing, I'll say that. So Fionnuala, you want to put us out of our mystery? What was the number one thing?
Anyone who answered misogyny.
Really? Wow. And
quite a few of the other answers, which were specific examples of how misogyny works.
So you'd say respect is in there, macho culture, would you say?
Macho culture, lack of recognition actually is an interesting one. And where pay does come in is there's an awful, we gather a lot of evidence and examples of women who are not getting equal pay for equal work. So, I mean, pay is so I think it's pay itself pays an indicator. Pays an indicator of value.
Yeah.
And particularly when you look at kind of what people feel about pay, people really care about pay in their immediate circle. So I will care far more about what the person next to me is being paid than I do about, a Fionnuala O'Conor who's sitting in Australia. And actually there's a lot of evidence that women are not being paid the same for the same work in the same context. So yeah, that's where pay comes in. But pay is almost just a symptom of this. I'm not being treated fairly, and I think that's something that is very, very persistent and denied in tech. And we hear all kinds of things like, I persistently hear a problem is that women need to get more qualified to be in tech. Women just don't have the computer science degrees, or they haven't done the crypto training program. Is like the French joke about what do you call, what's the English version? How do you say in English, or how do you say in French, pain-free childbirth? And the answer is a lie. It is just a lie. There are on average women. There are if you look at women in tech compared to men in tech, women are 6% more likely to have a degree, and a graduate degree. If you look at senior women, they're 13% more qualified than the men. So, this message, well, we've got to be upskilling the girls. Yeah, sure. And we've got to be upskilling the boys. But the reason why there aren't women in tech is not because there's a lack of qualified women out there. Not entirely, at least.
So, tech. One thing that occurs to me is, compared to most other industries, I think tech is very high risk and high reward. If your company does well, it could create many, many millionaires inside the company. There's not many industries where that type of thing happens. And so I wonder whether that turns people that turns people into versions of themselves that are not the real nice kind of versions of themselves. So if we don't get that deal over the line, there is a big problem for many people in the organization, and therefore it turns people into that sort of alpha male, highly aggressive, like pretty mental sort of, and I've seen it, sort of personality, which is not acceptable, and is very not acceptable in most other industries. Is that something that you've recognized from the research you've done?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things there. The tech that you're talking about, the high stakes, high returns, startup culture.
Yeah.
That's tech culture. Is it the reality of tech jobs? No, it's a tiny minority of tech jobs. Most people working in tech are working in large corporations, as most of the workforce does, or they're working as individual freelancers. And in neither of those cases are you talking about the startup fantasy. Now, even when you are talking about startups and that potential for high growth, when you actually look at kind of what startups succeed and which ones don't, I think it's women get about, I think it's as much as 2% of venture capital funding. And again, that has stayed stubbornly steady as a statistic. But actually, when you look at the success of how much of a return do those startups make on the investment? I should have the figure to hand, and I don't. But it's an awful lot more than 2%. Women's-led startups do really well. Now, why do they? Okay, there's partly not many of them get through the starting gate. So you've got only the best will even get into the game. But I think there's also a bit about, I would really question whether there is a correlation of success with those sort of macho, the tech cliche behaviors. Because actually all the research seems to suggest that no, that's what we think. Well, again, back to what people tell you. People tell you that's what makes a great leader. When you actually look at great leaders and look at how they behave, it's not the case. There's a really good book, actually, this is written by a guy, I'll put it in the chat, actually. It's written by a guy who is, I think it's Manpower's chief scientist, but it's a book about, leadership and what actually makes for a good leader. And his view is that the way that we get more women into leadership positions, and he talks a little bit about tech, but it's more a general book, is we just start looking at what actually makes a good leader. And if we do that, automatically, you'll find that roughly half of the leaders are women. And I think when you're looking at tech leadership and looking at successful tech unicorns, successful big tech companies, you see patterns of effective leadership that are very like the patterns elsewhere. Tech's not that special. And actually the myth of the wild genius who gets away with it because this is tech and is different, it's a myth like tapping for Tinkerbell.
I think.
Yeah,
Let me just go. Sorry, Andy. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one other thing, which is I expect, just tying a couple of things that you just said together there, Fionnuala, the 2% of people who get venture capital money who are women, I imagine that they're much more highly qualified than the average of the other 98%, and
Probably.
they actually have had to jump a higher bar in order to get that. So I suspect in the way that people get promoted, the women have to be higher qualified and whatever, as you said. I imagine it's exactly the same in the way that VC money is distributed.
Yeah, I think it, and it's quite interesting. There was a study, which again, if people are interested, very happy to send you the links to, of the Swedish government has a venture capital kind of arm, and they recorded the pitch sessions and also once the startups had left the discussion about the pitches, and they looked at, well, what kind of language is being used about a female founder compared to a male founder. First of all, did men and women use different language? And then also, was the discussion using different language? And did men and women use different language? Not really. Actually, we all, when we're founders pitching, we all give the founder pitch stick. There was a huge difference in how those absolutely similar the statements were heard. So women would be I think she's a little unrealistic. A man would say the same thing. He's really ambitious. He really understands the opportunity. I mean, that's why I suppose my 3-word answer to what do women want is men to listen.
On that note, I don't want to interject because this conversation is really good. However, we're running really fast to the end of the show, which I didn't even realize how fast we're going through this, which is evidence of how great this conversation has been so far. However, we need to take a mini break here, as we always do, because it's very, very important that everybody thinks of Brainfood Live as a conversation opening discourse, and we should never be a bottleneck for anything. But we do have to come off air in very short period of time. So if you've enjoyed this conversation to date and you want to continue the dialogue, please make sure you do so, even if we do come off air. And the way to do that is simply to expand the network of people that are watching the show. So grab your LinkedIn URL, just share it into the chat stream. If you're watching it on Crowdcast, if you're watching it on any of these LinkedIn sort of live streams that you're seeing it, whether it's Adam's, it's Joe McCarthy's, whether it's Juliana's, whatever it is that you're watching it, share your LinkedIn URL into the comment thread there and just simply connect with everyone who's done the same. Worst case scenario is you're going to walk away with this with 20, 30, 40, 50 connections that care about this topic, and then please go ahead and talk about it in your own time. Okay, cool. Fionnuala, we're going to have to move directly to recommendations. I'm sure there's a segment in your book, and I am hesitant to say, okay, don't spoil everything for us, but can you give us some general thoughts that have got you to say, you know what, if companies kind of did these 3 or 5 things, you would go a long way towards making your environment more welcoming and compatible for what women generally would want. What's your collection of thoughts there, Fionnuala?
Yeah, I mean, I think I know there are mostly recruiters watching and listening to this. So, I mean, the 3 things recruiters would do that would make such a difference that women have told us. Number 1, offer a clear deal. Do things like give a salary range. Women, sadly, for all kinds of reasons, are much less likely than men to sell themselves well. Why bother? They're going to find out anyway if you're paying them less than their peers. So, be clear about salary range and also about promotion deals. Women, just like men, want to see a future. So what's the kind of career structure? How are promotions decided? Offer a clear deal. Second thing, I think, back to my introduction about my typical squiggly female career, think about using skills-based hiring rather than the more traditional approach. When I ran Matchpoint, Matchpoint was a company that offered a selection solution that was based on skills-based hiring, white labeled it for clients. We had the company 5 years, and during that time, we as part of the deal, we got data from all our clients on, well, how have our hires that you've made using our system, how have they turned out? And also, how have your hires in general turned out? And skills-based hiring got 300% more high performers than the alternative. How do we know there's an alternative? Because every single company also used other hiring methods. So a big push for skills-based hiring, because as Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic says, that will actually equalize gender differences in terms of getting people in the door. And I think the third thing I'd say is be really, really aware of the ways that you're putting women off potentially. And that can be things like language, talk about culture add, not culture fit. There's lots of software, lots of advice out there on how to make your job applications, your job interviewing gender neutral. Level the playing field, look for the evidence. If recruiters do that, that will change everything so much. And for all the other ways in which we can change tech, well, I hope you'll buy the book.
You know what? I really like the fact that recruiters have got some practical input on this. Like, we're not passive actors into this story. And in fact, our job is, in fact, to ensure that the companies that we're representing have access to the best people and are building the best companies. So it's legitimately part of our task to do. So this is a key responsibility. Two questions actually I got for you, Fionnuala. Firstly, I'm surprised you didn't talk about introduction of more flexible type of working, because I assume that would be a significant component to making the organization more compatible for women. Was there a reason for that, or am I wrong in that presumption?
First, a couple of reasons. I didn't talk about that. One is that 88% of tech companies say they do that already. Again, this is a lie. But what exactly does flexible working mean? When all the women we talked to recently in tech, they were asking more for actually very tailored flexible working. Can we work it out together in the team?
Got it.
And I think that's a sign that generally, that I've found in other industries too. So I think rather than sort of one set policy that fits none, work it out. I think the other thing I'd say about flexible working is this isn't just for women. You will get better employees if you offer work that actually works for the people and works for the work. And that means some kind of flexible working. So I think, stopping the stupid is a great point, but I suppose I didn't feel that was particularly something for women. And I do think it's table stakes.
Yeah, that's interesting though to say it's not the universal sort of treatment of what your concept of flexibility is, because people have different requirements. So can we create a culture which enables people to actually, talk about it and negotiate actually what works? And in fact, can we actually make it dynamic so that it's not a case where you've committed to one way of working and then that's forever, because people's lives change, or your needs change, or your interests change. So, of course, we need to create some flexibility through time as well as through, format. Okay, very, very good. Final question for you. When is the book out? I'm sure everyone's going to say, we need to have this in our hands. When is it being published?
Well, that has to be a tune in next time, because we're negotiating with publishers now. So keep in touch and I will let you know that. And Patricia and I will be talking more about the book, our findings, and actually also about all this other research we've done, because I think, the book is pulling together a lot of what we found, both about the situation of women in tech, but even more so how we fix it. And the more that we can all take part in that discussion, the more we can help each other, the more we can connect people, the better. So please keep in touch with that. And, of course, buy the book, but more than that, keep being interested, keep talking and doing things like today, which is brilliant. As even being a participant has been brilliant. And normally I have the lovely privilege of being in the audience. So
I'm very pleased that you enjoyed your coming on, Fionnuala. We'll definitely get you back on. Let me know in the chat, guys, if you want sort of Fionnuala to return. I think there's so much more to say, to dig into as well. So it feels like we've just scratched a little bit of the surface, and there's probably more to dive into. So if you're up for it, we might want to bring you back and talk about another angle that could be relevant here. But let me leave you to your weekend, Fionnuala. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you. And yeah, you have a very good weekend.
You too. Pleasure. Thanks.
Cool. Okay, so we're gonna have to roll it and finish it at this point because it is on the dot 3 p.m. should I say. We're back next week, folks. We've got another amazing show for you. What are we talking about? I think we're talking about how to conduct an AI bias audit. So if you're not aware of this, basically we have a situation whereby there's tons of regulations starting to roll in different parts of the world, in the US, in EU, in China, in all different places where they're saying, you know what, if you're using AI, you got to do it this way. Do we know anything about that? Answer is no. However, one of the things that we do need to get good at is understanding the lay of the land, general direction as to where this legislation is going. So I'm a big promoter of people using AI to get more efficient. Operational efficiency is a big component of what we do as recruiters. But at the same time, let's not do the stuff that we know is going to be kiboshed when these laws come into place. So how do we actually use AI ethically? How do we actually conduct an audit so that we can check whether our usage of AI is going to be compliant on today's rules and the rules that we're seeing that are going to be made law in 2024. We've got Bob Pulver joining us for that. We've got Andrew Godamski joining for that. We might even get Dr. Sarah Ali to join us as well. So if you're sort of interested in this topic, do register for the show, follow the channel, and we'll see you there next week. Okay, cool. That's it. I'll see you there. All right. Sorry, I dropped out, mate.
No, it's fine. I was actually going to say at the start, I've got a funny feeling I'm going to end up hosting the show today. I don't know why. I had a feeling. But like the topic of that conversation we were just talking about there. I mean, that is such a big topic, and there are so many different aspects to it. And every question we asked, an answer we got, every question we asked, we could have got a 30-minute answer because there's so much to it.
Yeah. The what we could have done, I mean, what we should do, and we get this quite often actually, the topic selection probably needs to be a little bit narrower. Or, I mean, it's not a disaster because it was
a good intro. It was a great intro to the
exactly.
subject.
What this means is it teases up. Sometimes, I mean, it's rare, but sometimes there's a few things where we run out of things to say and we've kind of done the conversation. But there we just scratched the conversation, so we can just like have a think about diving deep. And I think Fionnuala's watching the show regularly, so you can pop on any time. So yeah, it's all good. All right, what are you doing this weekend, man?
Can we do that show? Can we do that show where it's open house and anybody can just join? Maybe like at Christmas.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just save a slot like first week of December or something, which is this is open house. It's like an open bar.
Yeah. Let me just switch it on. Actually, I want to see if this actually works. So there's not many people watching anymore, but I don't know how do you do this. People. Yeah, open stage. So this goes open stage now, right? So I think anybody who's still watching this show can actually just come on.
Right, come on then. Who's there?
So, thing is, do you remember though? We did this the first iteration of Brainfood live.
Yeah.
The plan was to do exactly this. We chose Crowdcast so that people would wonder, oh, someone's wandered in.
Michael.
Who is this? We've got more than one. We've got Chloe.
Unbiased hiring. There's Chloe.
Fionnuala there.
Here.
Everyone's
just asked.
driving in. There we
It
go.
works.
It works. It works. So anyway, folks, there's another little bit of a chat stream for you. What are your thoughts on us like having a segment towards the end where we just like pile everyone in and you know, random pub chat to finish off the thing? That might be worth doing, right? So
it could be a total bun fight. It could be like,
oh no, who's this? It's Chris.
Chris.
Oh, you do. Thing is though, you're gonna get some wrong un turn up in, you know what I mean? Not dressed for work, etc. There's a risk attached to this. There's, you know what I mean? Anyway, it's I think a good idea, and please, people are popping in, and maybe we just put a segment towards the end where we say, you know what, you want to talk about this? Let's pile in and bring the crowd. Bring the crowd. We'll call it. We'll do it.
There's
All right.
so much knowledge in that crowd, and actually, one of the frustrating things as a presenter is not being able to engage in the chat and follow the chat. And yeah,
I'm definitely putting this on my CV as my brain food debut for the last 5 minutes. So.
Do it. You brain food panelist. Absolutely.
You've busted in uninvited, Chris. You've literally crashed it.
He was invited. He was literally invited. You just invited him.
No, but I love the fact he's just come on. I mean, I think this is what we need. We need people who are prepared to just, you know, everyone's watching a screen anyway. I'm pretty certain everyone's got webcam to the ready, so
do
we
it
can all
during
do
the
this.
show.
Yeah. So we'd maybe do a middle segment, like a middle eighth, and bring everyone on, and you know, boot them all off. All right, listen.
What happens if there's 20 people and they're all shouting over each other?
I actually
nice
don't know.
problem to have.
I think there is a limit on screen, but I don't know what that limit is, so we'll see. But anyway, listen, everyone's got to go. So thank you for joining. Great to see you, Chris. Great to see you, Fee. Adam, I'll see you later.
Right, bye.
And we'll see everyone next week. Okay, see you later.
Bye.
Stop recording. Yes.